Well, for more on that, let's speak to James Denselow, who's a security analyst based at King's College here in London. Thank you for joining us. Very interesting, some of the comments there from the head of the armed forces. How do you contain something and make sure it's not a threat without actually trying to defeat it?
Well, I think that the war on terror has always been twofold. It's been on the offensive in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it's been on the defensive when it comes to improving the security of our borders, whether it's through passport biometric scans or whether it's through an increased presence and monitoring system with flights around the world. So I think there is a balance to be had between what we do on the offence and what we do on the defence. The really interesting point I think made here is whether in actually invading Iraq we've actually made al-Qaeda stronger, in the sense that al-Qaeda didn't exist in Iraq until we invaded the country. So I think we have to be very clear that sometimes in the war on terror, less can be more when it comes to defeating ideas.
It's interesting that he's saying it now. In the UK, it's Remembrance Sunday. It's when people here remember those who died in the wars. And I think in the past few years, it's been interesting. Usually we're used to seeing old veterans from the First and Second World War. Now we're seeing younger men who perhaps were injured during Iraq and Afghanistan. Do you think he's preparing for an exit strategy or telling the British public that their idea of victory has to change?
Well, I think we already have an exit strategy. We've left Iraq and we've set the dates in terms of leaving Afghanistan. So I think it's much more a case of using Remembrance Sunday as a means of assessing our current position in the world vis-à-vis the wars we're fighting. And of course, I think it's incredibly important the way in which he put out the fact that we will not see a victory parade in the same sense as we saw after World War II. The victory won't be declared in that same sense. Rather, we have to imagine that we've got an idea and a problem that's being dealt with by a much more upstream issue, such as, for example, communicating via development spending our ideas and our values rather than simply military might.
The idea behind al-Qaeda was around long before 9/11. It's when 9/11 happened that NATO went into Afghanistan. So what will be the British definition and the American definition of victory in Afghanistan? As long as they think that it could be a haven for potential terrorists, surely they're not going to leave.
Well, that's the really tough question to ask, is that clearly al-Qaeda can thrive in non-state environments where the governments aren't able to control what goes on. And of cases, of course, there's hundreds of places around the world where those environments exist, whether it's Somalia, Sudan, large parts of Afghanistan, northern Pakistan today. Now, it's a far more ambitious agenda to attempt to control those areas rather than to come to some kind of military
Even Richard
vendor.
Keith was saying that democracy might be the key. Do you think democracy is the key?
Well, if you look back to the original purpose of the war on terror in terms of exporting democracy to Iraq as a means of ensuring accountable governments, there's no doubt in my mind that one of the main reasons al-Qaeda exists is because in large parts of the Arab world we do have authoritarian governments who don't give their citizens any freedoms at all. And it's the kind of backlash against the far enemy that was designed in 9/11's case to bring attention to the region that was using this. So yes, democracy does have a part to play, but clearly it can't be exposed from without. It has to come from reform from within.
Well, other people would say that often the ideology behind al-Qaeda is also fueled by the foreign policy of, let's say, the US and the UK. Do you think that the view of General Sir David Richards is shared in the US? Do you think they feel the same way, that they would say it anyway?
I don't think it's exactly the same. I think it's said very differently, but certainly I feel that General Petraeus, who's currently running the operations in Afghanistan, is, he's a counterinsurgency expert. He does believe that often you have to do less to achieve more. He does believe that you have to win hearts and minds, not use the same methods that have been used for the majority of the war on terror to date. So I do believe that it is a case of a mindset. We've got two administrations in Washington and London, both who've inherited wars rather than started them. So they're much more concerned with how to deal with the current war today and how we move forward as countries, which of course is what he's done.
James Denselow from King's College here in London. Thank you.